Corbon Glaser safety slug. These used to be a really awesome load, and I believe they're developed for like airline marshals so they could use them to, in case they needed to use a firearm in an airplane where they wouldn't get over penetration, and potentially they wouldn't get penetration through the actual airplane. I believe that's what they're designed for. And Glazer used to make these a long time ago, and then they ceased production, but Corbon has now the rights to Glazer, so they're making the Glazer safety slug in 9mm+P. And what these are, they're an 80 grain, and instead of a lead core, what they basically got inside there is birdshot. It's filled up, the copper jacket is filled with birdshot essentially, and then they're plugged by that blue plug there. And the idea is they're supposed to like dump most of their energy in a very shallow distance, kind of just like a fragmenting round or a frangible or something like that. But I want to see how these things will do. So they're 80 grains and they're rated at 1475 feet per second. I'm going to do this test with my 5-inch M&P and my 3.2-inch Taurus G2C. So I'm going to go through the chronograph, see what kind of velocity and accuracy I get at the same time. And I am going to do my standard test that I do, but then I have a different test planned after that. So we're going to go into plain clear ballistics to see what the best potential of those cartridges are, see what kind of penetration we get, see what kind of fragmentation we get. And then I'm going to move on to doing more of a real world simulation where I'm going to have 4 layers of sweatshirt material on this first 3-inch piece that represents hitting a pectoral muscle, followed by a 1/4-inch medium density fiberboard that represents hitting ribs or sternum, 16 more inches of clear ballistics, and another 1/4-inch MDF at the back to represent hitting back ribs. Clear ballistics is roughly a half representation of the density of flesh, so 3 inches and 16 inches is more like 1.5 inches and 8 inches in a real living target. So we're going to do our plain clear ballistics shot, then our real world simulation shot, and then you might see this. Then I want to do a drywall test, and the reason for this is specifically because people have told me I use the Glazer safety slug in my house because it won't go through walls. That's what they've said to me. I'm pretty skeptical on that. So what I got going on here is 2 layers of drywall and, spaced out by a 2x4, just like a real house. And I did actually paint the fronts of these to be more authentic. So to compare the Glazer safety slug to something traditional, I'm going to use our Remington Golden Saber bonded 124 grain. That is a +P. That's a pretty typical round. Golden Saber bonded, gold dot, HST, they're all going to kind of do similar things. They're more traditional, and we'll see how a traditional round does, and then we'll hit that with the Glazer safety slug, see if there's an improvement in its ability to not go through harder barriers. And then after all that, I am going to shoot the steel target to see what kind of practical accuracy and shootability I get with these. So let's get started with this test. All right, first up, we're going to run this through the 5-inch barrel. It is rated at 1475 feet per second. That's likely through a 4-inch barrel, but I don't know that. Let's see how close we get to 1475 through my 5-inch M&P here. $15.29, $14.92, $15.09, $14.54, $14.79. So yeah, a little bit above rate of velocity, and honestly there's like no recoil there. It's kind of like shooting a 22 out of that pistol. Let's see how close we get to 1475 out of my 3.2-inch Taurus G2C here. 1401, 1402, 1430, 1412, 1423. Relatively consistent, and I would say that's acceptable. Being only a 3.2-inch barrel, very low recoil, a little bit more than on that 5-inch barrel, obviously, but very, very low. I would say less than a typical 9mm. So let's hit our ballistics gel block and see how this ammo does out of these 2 different barrel lengths. All right, first up, we'll do our plain clear ballistic shot. No fabric in the way that could potentially clog a hollow point. No rib simulation that could potentially slow down its penetration. So let's see what we get out of our 5-inch barrel and our plain clear ballistic shot. All right. Now let's hit that from our subcompact pistol. Let's go take a look. All right, that is some pretty low penetration there, and it dumped its energy right away. And yeah, most of that bird shot is on the front of this target and in this first 3-inch piece. Yeah, that's pretty bad. So that definitely didn't penetrate very far. And here's the thing though, you know, clear ballistics is a half representation of the density of flesh. So what you're seeing here is, you know, double what it would be in an actual living target. So this is some pretty low penetration here. I mean, it's very impressive fragmentation. And where I'm going to mention these measurements, parallax is going to throw this off a lot by my camera angles here, but I'm looking at this from a straight on view. With our 5-inch barrel, we're at 7 3/4 inches of penetration. So what that equate to is just a little bit less than 4 inches in an actual living target. You know, would that be enough? It would be potentially enough to hit something vital, but I mean, you're really on that border there whether that's going to be enough. For a subcompact, I thought that this would actually, it would go deeper in our subcompact, but no, 5.5 inches. So that's going to equate to, you know, not even 3 inches for a living target. So that didn't penetrate that far. That dumped its energy. Now, when we put it on our fabric and our rib simulation in there, I think that'll change that up quite a bit. But we'll see. Let's put on our fabric foot and our rib simulation and see how these compare in our real world simulation. All right, our real world simulation, 4 layers of sweatshirt material, followed by 3 inches of clear ballistics that represents hitting a pectoral muscle, followed by a 1/4 inch medium density fiberboard that represents hitting ribs or sternum, 16 more inches of clear ballistics, and then another 1/4 inch MDF at the back to represent hitting back ribs. And just for reference, something like that Golden Saber bonded would go to, you know, roughly 15-16 inches after going through the first rib simulation. So let's see how our safety slug does here through our real world simulation. 5-inch barrel. Let me set that back up and we'll hit it with a 3.2-inch barrel. All right, 3.2-inch barrel, real world simulation. Let's go take a look. All right, so yeah, it destroyed that rib simulation. You can see a few pieces of those bird shot hitting that, but yeah, that definitely dumped its energy. And I would say, you know, through the fabric, not really huge difference with the fabric in the way for its energy dump. It dumped a ton of energy. Now this brought it closer together to each other between the barrel lengths, but it's still not particularly impressive here. So what we got going on here with our 5-inch barrel, and again, parallax is really going to throw this off. I'm going to call it in 4 1/4 inches. So yeah, that's not going to hit something vital for sure. If it's going through ribs, it's just not. With a 3.2-inch barrel, went a hair deeper. We're about 1 inch more. The track goes about 1 inch more to 5 1/4 inches. So yeah, I don't know here. I'm thinking that people might have something with that whole drywall thing. That being said, they kind of have something without anything in the way, where it's probably not going to stop your attacker anyways. Interesting here. Interesting overall. This is pretty bad. But let's put on our drywall and see how this does in our drywall simulation before we call this. All right, so this is going to be our inside the house dweller simulation here. So we have 2 layers of drywall, and the whole idea here is, you know, a lot of people are saying they use this because if they make a shot at a bad guy that broke into their house and they happen to miss that shot and it happens to hit a wall, like an interior wall, it's not going to go through that wall and hit somebody like in a bedroom that's just an innocent person in there. So this is our real world interior dweller simulation here. So I just have 1 layer of t-shirt on the front of my ballistics gel because that's typical for inside a house. 1 layer of t-shirt, and then our real world simulation after that, pretty much. So first up, I'm going to run a standard round here of our Golden Saber bonded. So we'll see what this would do, and then we'll compare that to the safety slug. I'll try to do 2 shots of the safety slug, you know, one from each barrel length, but just 1 shot of the Golden Saber bonded here. So this is going to be a challenge to try to hit this. So I did put rib simulation all over everything here. So I'm going to guess where I think this is going to hit the gel. So here's our Golden Saber bonded. Let's go take a look. All right, I actually successfully hit that. I thought I was going to miss completely. And that's pretty typical here. And that thing actually expanded. So our total track with that went to about 12 3/4 inches, full expansion, a lot of energy dump. That's crazy. I wouldn't have thought that would do that like that. So let's try our safety slug now. All right, our safety slug. I'm going to try to go just a little bit lower and a little bit to the right, so I can hit all fresh drywall and still try to get that in the block there. So here's our safety slug. Let's go take a look. Okay. So now, I wasn't expecting this. This is the opposite. People are saying they use this in their house to protect innocent people, and it's actually doing the opposite and failing. It hit a whole bunch of energy dump right there going in there. We went through that rib simulation there. And it's close to the other one. Here's our, that's our traditional hollow point. That's our safety slug. This is awful. People are relying on this and telling me that they use it for home defense. They should change what they're doing after seeing this. Ton of damage in that gel. We went to 14 3/4. So this went from pretty much non-lethal with no barrier to extremely lethal with a barrier. This is bad. Let me hit it with the 3.2 inch barrel and see how that does. All right, so I'm going to try to hit a little bit higher in that block. Let's see what happens through our 3.2 inch barrel. Let's go take a look. That is weird. Now with the 3.2 inch barrel, something different happened. That is just so bizarre. Now it hit in the same area for some reason as the others, but this one didn't go through, and this one completely stopped against that rib simulation, so it only went to 3 inches and it actually worked. That is weird. Let's confirm that. I'm gonna do it one more time. See if I can hit it a little bit more to this side of the block. All right, so I'm gonna try to go quite a bit more right and hopefully still catch this in the block. So one more try. Go take a look. Yeah, so we confirmed here with its own hole here. That's no good. And this is sporadic. It's all over the place what it's going to do. There's jackets down there and everything. This is bad. 3.2 inch barrel, still a lot of damage. 12.5 inches, so we're still meeting our FBI protocol for penetration, for making sure to hit something vital, which basically it's their lethality test. Not good. Not good. So sporadic performance, absolutely a terrible home defense cartridge, because honestly, like both of those went further than that Golden Saber bonded through the drywall. That's bad. I hope this is eye-opening to people, that they shouldn't just like use their own imagination to decide what something's going to do. You really need testing to know what something's going to do. So when I'm looking at this ammo, I'm not seeing anything good about it. Yes, it'll dump plenty of energy if it hits a soft target, and it's not going to pass through a bad guy. But if you miss that shot, forget about it fragmenting. There's better rounds for that, for fragmenting and frangible. So yeah, this is some old school, old designs, and I'm not liking it. So I'll probably hear from Corbon. They've reached out before. But yeah, not the best I've seen here. So let's pull these out of block. We'll try to take a close-up look at what's left, and then I'm going to shoot our steel and see how these will compare to like more traditional rounds. All right, so here's a semi close-up look at these bullets. It's hard for me to pick them up. This is such a jumbled mess. This is why you didn't see measurements like I normally show of the expansion, because it was so impossible. This is what I recovered from our traditional plain clear gel shot and our fabric and MDF shot. I don't know which is which. They just flattened petals here, some pieces of bird shot, all over pieces of this. It's just a big old mess. So now the one's going through our drywall here. Here is our golden saber bonded here. And I wouldn't have thought that that would do as well as that did, actually. It's not a bad round of ammo. That did pretty well. I mean, not well in terms of like stopping, but if you wanted to punch through a barrier and stop expansion, that's a good cartridge. Now, when we look at the safety slug here, this is the one from our 3.2-inch barrel, our first one that flattened up against the rib simulation. And then one of these is the one that went deeper from our 3.2-inch barrel, and the other one is the one that went through deep with the 5-inch barrel. And all they are is just empty jackets. So this is just a big old mess here. Take it as you will. I don't know how to even judge this, to be honest, but personally I would not use it. But that's a close-up look at those bullets. All right, 14 yards from the target. So what I want to do here is use my subcompact pistol to see how these things will shoot from 14 yards here. So I'm going to compare these to Fiocchi Defense Dynamics 124 grain jacketed hollow point, and I'll see how those shoot, and then I'll see how our Glazer blue shoots from the subcompact pistol. Then with the longer barrel, I think I'll back it up. So let's see how our Fiocchi shoots. 14 yards. All right, it's shootable. I'm just getting a front sight picture there and popping them off. I'm not going for groups. And interesting. Let's see how our Glazer blue does. Alright, so yeah, this is a little bit easier to control, to be honest, than the standard. And the standard wasn't even a +P, and this is. So, for the amount of energy you're getting, it is impressive. And that is because it's an 80 grain bullet. You get less muzzle flip. So it is very easy to shoot. I'll give it that. Let's back up and just see how these things will shoot from my longer barrel, to see if there's any shift in accuracy with these, see how they shoot. So let's do that. All right, 75 yards from the target, 5-inch 9mm+P here. So my first 5 rounds are going to be some Fiocchi Defense Dynamics 124 grain jacketed hollow point. I'm just going to aim center mass and see where those impact. And then the remaining 12 rounds are those 80 grain Glazer safety slugs. So let's see how our Defense Dynamics does from 75 yards here. All right, so now we're on to our Glazer blues. Let's see how this does. It's a lot faster. So it's hard to tell which ones I missed and which ones I hit. I think I had at least 3 misses. A lot less recoil again. You know, there's a big difference there. Like I'm shooting the 124 grains. You know, I have to struggle a little bit there to just bring it back down and kind of relax again. As where with these, every shot I'm relaxed because, you know, there's no muzzle flip. It's like the sights come right back down to where they were very easily without even trying. So I would say as a round for somebody that's maybe recoil sensitive, this isn't bad. But here's the thing. I would never recommend this stuff for serious self-defense because it's just not going to do the things that people think they're going to do. And I'm not blaming Corbon for this. I'm not blaming them for the false ideas that are out there. You know, I'm blaming more or less internet rumor for it. You know, a lot of people get an idea of what they think is going to happen and they say it. I use this for self-defense at home because, and somebody's like, that does make sense. I don't think it would go through a wall if it's full of birdshot. I'm going to use that. And then it just snowballs from there. Everybody's using it for home defense because it's not going to punch through a drywall. And yet nobody's out there testing it. So what I'm seeing with this is not particularly good performance at all. You know, you got under penetration, and some of those shots in my real world simulation didn't even go through the rib simulation. But then when you put the barrier there of drywall, what people are using it for the house, well, now it prevents that from fragmenting out, and it just punches right through and would easily, you know, hurt somebody. And they're, you know, the whole intention of the people getting this is for the opposite effect of that. So not good overall, not good overall. So that's what you get today. So as always, comment, share, and like, and thanks for watching.